Hi, I'm Billy,
Hi, I'm Camille.
and this is a podcast with two canine behavior consultants where we shoot the shit about behavior, dogs, and life because sometimes it does go as planned and sometimes it doesn't.
Exactly.
And thank you for joining us today. We have with us Liz Randall, who Liz has held her certified pet dog training credential since 2011 and works regularly with both high-level behavior modification and canine sports clientele, both locally in Southern California and across the country. She competes locally, nationally in agility with her dogs, who have won and podiumed at the UKI US Open, UKI West Coast Open, multiple UKI Cups and Classics, multiple USDA regional events. Liz works with clients in the San Diego, California area at private facilities across the US and online, including via cleanrun.com. She loves to teach her students the importance of learning theory, how to better observe their dogs, and technical training mechanics. And more personally, she's one of my first mentors, and I just really love the shit out of her. So, Liz, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's nice to meet you, Liz. Thanks so much for being
Nice
here.
to meet you, Camille. And thank you, Kelly. Yes, Kelly's one of my favorite people. Kelly was one of my early training mentees, and she was very insistent that she wanted to learn and work with me, and it was awesome.
Sort of a learning curve. There's always a learning curve when you have to deal with me. And Liz
For
did a
both
really
of
great
us.
job.
For both of us.
I
We
appreciate
both
that.
had some learning that happened in that time period for sure.
But and here we are today where I am so excited to talk to you about high drive dogs. This is something that is a label thrown around in the dog world a lot. And so I kind of just want to have discussion about it, see if we can maybe shut down some of the myths we hear about and just talk about it. So to start us off, Liz, what does a high drive dog mean to you?
So I'm going to actually defer to Denise Fenzi, I think, has one of the better definitions that I've heard. And so I tend to defer to just her definition because I think it's pretty succinct. So she says, high drive dogs stay in the game under adversity. So, i.e., they stick it out, and they stick it out when any sane dog would opt out when things are just not working out anymore. So they're going to power through, right? But that's a pretty broad definition. I think, and there's a lot of discussion about what drive is and what drive isn't and what drives there are out there. We don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but I do know for a fact that there are individual drives that different dogs are going to have, and different dogs are going to have different levels of those individual drives, right? So one dog may have more prey drive, whereas a different dog may have a lot of chase drive, but that doesn't mean that they're going to follow through down that predatory sequence, right? So talking about drive can be extremely individualized to the individual dog. And then what's innate and then what is reinforced and is then of course then the whole other ball of wax that we can get into.
That's exactly where my questions were going. What's innate and what's reinforced? Because the definition you gave from Denise Fenzi suggests that they know what the task is. It suggests that they have the goal in mind.
Exactly.
And when you're talking about prey drive or the other one you mentioned, that's more innate, right? So there's no teaching there.
Yeah. So I think yes. So, the easy place to start is like on that predatory sequence, right? And so prey drive gets thrown around a lot, but which part of the sequence are we talking, right? Because chase, a lot of dogs, I've had dogs that have a decent amount of chase, but do they actually have the catch? Do they actually have the kill? Do they have all those things, right? And so some dogs that will exhibit a high amount of chase drive will chase and chase and chase, but then they actually catch and then they go, uh-oh, like, oh crap, what now, right?
What do I do?
So that may manifest in a different way than a dog that will actually catch and kill, right?
Mhm.
And then one really fascinating example, and I think I do have some video that I really should throw together, but I had a dog that Kelly knew very well who had insane prey drive. And this dog would hunt, catch, kill, like a beast. And he was very efficient and very effective. Now, he would catch rodents, he would catch squirrels, he would catch rats, et cetera, et cetera. This same dog would let a chicken walk up to his face and peck him in the face and not say so much as boo at it, right? Like he might lift a lip, but more likely than not, he would walk away. And so I find that like so fascinating. So I could say that dog had an insanely high prey drive. He was a master hunter, but yet it was so specific and contextual to a very specific type of animal. And even in case anyone's wondering, I watched that dog rolling around the chicken coop, catching squirrels with chickens in there and, bouncing off the walls, and he wouldn't touch the chicken. So it was very calculated, right? And when we look at different breeds of dogs, there's different breeds of dogs that are going to be specific to, to birds or to rodents or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I don't know, I find all that stuff so fascinating and so interesting.
I'm with you. And Camille, do you have any questions? Because you know my head.
Well, I find it fascinating that you're talking about this dog that had such prey drive and didn't bother other animals. So it was specific to small rodent type animals.
Now, that to be fair, that dog did not have a ton of experience around cats and things like that. He was, however, very well trained. And so the few times we did have cats in the area, I could just tell him to, leave it alone, and he would. So we never got in trouble in that department. I don't think he was ever really exposed to like big game like deer or anything like that. So I don't know, and then we get into the training part, and then we get into the reinforcement part of it too, right? He was just a well-trained dog and had a ton of skills on board. And so I could manage him in those scenarios. So what he would have done left to his own devices, like with a bunch of deer running, across the trail or something, I don't really know what he would have done. I feel like it could have gone either way, but really interesting how species specific, at least in my limited experience, that it was.
That was interesting.
Really is. That's fascinating.
Liz taught me how to hike off leash with Liz and Christine Young, I worked on that over there, and Charles was beautiful. And then we came here and he saw his first deer, and it was just everything went out the window. Didn't get to train with him.
Didn't practice on deer out in California.
Right.
Yeah. We have them, just not like in North Carolina.
Nothing like North Carolina. No, it's very different here. But I want to point out what you didn't, what you said high drive isn't, essentially, which it's not a dog, every dog that pulls on a leash, every dog that can't hear directions, every dog that jumps and all of that. That's not anything to do with the definition of your high drive.
No, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I did want to talk about that. There's a lot of confusion, especially probably not so much in the not so much in the pet dog world, because they don't talk about, drive and dogs, but in the sport dog world in particular, you hear a lot of people say, oh, that dog has high drive, when they just see a dog, kind of, arousal is not drive, arousal and drive are two very different things. There can even be stress, that some people can think is drive. Drive is focused and intentional action towards an end goal, right? And that is entirely separate from what we would call arousal, but there's a lot of confusion and lumping between those two things for sure. Arousal is not drive. Now, a high drive, well-trained dog absolutely can be working in arousal, right? But unfocused arousal in and of itself has absolutely nothing to do with drive, in my opinion. Does that make sense?
Is there a difference? I was thinking of a high drive working dog, like a German Shepherd, or there's got to be a different mechanism, maybe not, that or even a lab that's just service dog. So I used to work for a group that would breed, raise, and train Labrador Retrievers to be service dogs. And finding that dog that was relaxed and calm and gentle, but yet had a good drive and wanted to work and be on a lot, it was a fine balance. Is that I've never had much experience with high drive, like
herding breeds.
Yeah, herding breed. As far as training and doing, agility and things like that. Is it the same working drive?
I would say the specific scenario you're talking about, Camille, is actually tricky, because it's a little bit easier, I think, to manifest in activity where there's in functions where there's a lot of like physical activity involved, right? So there's an outlet for the drive to go somewhere. Whereas like you're saying with like the working service type dogs, we do want a dog that's going to power through, but then there's that dichotomy of, oh, but the dog also has to be calm, right? And so
right.
I think that's a tricky situation. And obviously it can be done and it is done. But that's where it can get a little challenging. And I think, that's also why we tend to choose specific breeds for service type work, because they tend to maybe be a little bit more moderate in their energy, or the breeding programs, right? The breeding programs are specifically selecting for dogs who are moderate energy, but still have that drive to follow the human's direction. And I don't have a good word for that. I'm sure there is somebody out there who's already talked about this extensively, but whether we want to call it like socially motivated drives, or
like type A personality.
deference to humans. What, Kelly?
It sounds like type A personality.
No. It's more, no, I'm thinking like socially like dogs that are going to naturally want direction from the handler. So like not a Spitz.
Okay, fair enough.
Or not, not like a terrier type dog. Not, we're not talking like huskies or, I don't know.
A chow, yeah.
Whatever. Yeah, exactly. We're talking like labs, we're talking Goldens, we're talking, herding breeds, we're talking dogs that have been bred for generations to take very finite instructions from the human half. So like I said, I'm sure there's someone who's articulated that social drive definition much better than I am right now, but I think that's absolutely a thing that is there to I hate to say this because we're all not supposed to say this, but the like wants to please gene, that is a thing. Not every dog has it, as we well know, but some dogs are actually, more likely to be, coded with that gene than others. And those are the dogs that for like that service work, you can kind of balance that. Those dogs need that, right, to be functioning.
Yeah, and they love that eye contact. They love that direction. They look to their human to say, okay, what can I do to whatever. I think so. Would you say there are typical breeds that have high drive that maybe don't look to their human, for example? Or do you see breeds that are high drive all the time, like you can count on it?
Yeah, I mean, there's individuals within each breed, right? But as a general rule, there's a reason that there's a million border collies that do agility and in herding, right? Like they are programmed to take direction from handlers, from humans at high speeds, right? There's a reason we see Mals and Dutchies and German Shepherds in bite work, right? They're programmed to bite things and take a lot of, so yeah, there's those. But to your first part of the question, which I actually think is really interesting, is I don't know if you remember exactly what you said, but I think it was dogs that have high drives that aren't seeking direction from the handler. Yeah,
that's
I would say
social.
100%. 100%. So, but not, that would be like your husky, like your sled dogs, right? Like they still need to listen in some capacity, but their like job is to just like keep running and running and running and running and running and running. And even I would say sight hounds also fall into that category for sure. Coursing, when they're coursing game, there's basically no direction from the human half. It's like you let go, and the dog's job is to run down the prey. I'm sure we could come up with a million other examples.
Right.
But yeah. So any of the terriers, like terriers going to ground, same thing, right? They're going to ground and they're digging and they're going after that thing. And there's not a lot of direction from the human handler as they're going after their prey. They know what to do, right? So they don't need direction really.
From a dog trainer point of view, I think owners are hard to understand their terriers who don't look for that direction, right? They're very independent, and they go to
Yep.
ground and they're doing their job and that's what they're supposed to do. And it's hard for, I think, pet owners to realize the differences in breeds like that. I don't think they often think it through. I'm sorry, Kelly, I think I
No, it's
interrupted you.
so interesting because like Liz, as you're describing like what breeds you typically see on the agility field or what breeds you typically have more experience dealing with high drive, you left out the Huskies and the Chows and the large Guardian breeds. But then the question of drive without the person component, you're like, wait, Huskies, Terriers, let's bring this back in. Like it's so complicated. And you can hear in every podcast we interviewed someone, everyone is watching how they say things because the animal world, the dog training world is so severe in trying to say it must be this way and this way is the way and this is right. And just the more we accept that it's never right or wrong, the easier it is to have this discussion.
And again, we're talking in very broad generalizations here,
Yes.
right? Of course, there are Huskies that can do agility, that do well in agility, but they're the exception, not the rule, right? Of course, there are Chows and Shiba Inus and random breeds that do well at agility, but again, those aren't the dogs that you look at the weekend catalog and see 200 of. You see 200 border collies and you see one Husky, right? Like that's not random. Like there's a reason for that.
Yeah. Fair enough. And when you're training for agility or just any high drive in general for whatever task at hand, do you prefer using food or do you prefer using a toy?
It's entirely dog and situation
Awesome.
dependent, right? So it depends what I'm doing. The first question I might ask is, am I trying to build excitement and motivation and speed, or am I working on more of a precision type behavior? So if I'm working on something that's more precision based, it's likely I'm going to use food. If I'm looking for more speed and energy and I'm not worried about like a super specific picture, then I might be using toys. But again, it's very dog dependent too, right? Not every dog wants to take food when they're in a more aroused state. Not every dog has the drive to play with toys when they're in a new environment. So it's super, super dependent on the context and the situation.
Do you find that you have your clients work on the dog's ability to rotate between food and treats?
That's a super good question. It's kind of funny. I for a long time I was very much, and I still believe this, but my framing has changed a little bit. I was very much of the mind that we should not force a dog to take quote unquote reinforcement that they don't want. And I still believe that. But I would find ways to work around a dog that only preferred one reinforcer or another. I wouldn't expect or work super hard at getting the dog to exchange back and forth between the two types of reinforcers in the same session, if that makes sense. Susan Garrett was really into that for a long time, and it became very embedded in our cultural agility collective consciousness that the dog had to be able to like switch back and forth constantly. And I still don't believe that's the case. I think with good training, you can get whatever done that you need to get done. That said, I've shifted a little bit in that I do encourage people to make a little bit more effort, and we have to do it thoughtfully. But it is, as someone who has had a dog that only wants to work for toys and not work for food, it can be hard at times. And so as he's gotten older, I've spent a little bit more time working on the food thing, and it has actually gotten a lot better. And I do always say, like, the more tools you have in your toolbox,
Yeah.
the more competent you're going to be. So I do think it's important, but again, super specific to the context, to the handler, to the dog. Sometimes, I have a good friend who's working with a dog right now remotely, remote client, and the dog has a host of intestinal issues and food issues, and that person came to my friend as I want to increase my dog's food drive, but looking at the medical side of things, it's like, well, that's kind of your vet's department right now. So why don't we instead like focus on this toy skills and cleaning that up and getting the most that we can out of your toy situation, because food is almost off the table in some ways right now. Does that make sense? A little bit of a tangent, but it's point being, I think it's very specific to each individual. But again, going back, always the more tools that you can build and put in your toolbox is just going to give you more options and more flexibility.
It builds off of Susan Friedman's quote, "The learner defines the reinforcer," but we can keep
100%.
learning more.
Yep. There's usually some wiggle room there somewhere to just keep adding, right? We don't necessarily want to manipulate or change the learner's preference, but can we add to the learner's existing preferences, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. Camille, do you have any follow-up questions? Because I can already once again feel my head going.
No, you go ahead. I'm learning tons and I'm loving it. This is I'm not much into the high drive world very much. But like I said, more service dogs and things like that, but not high drive. So I'm learning a ton.
Well, I mean, this brings us to the next kind of conversation I wanted to bring here, which is frustration tolerance, because switching between reinforcers can create a lot of frustration. So before we jump into that, Liz, can you define what frustration tolerance means to you?
I will say I do use that term because it's a functional term, but I don't really like it.
Okay, tell me more.
I actually made some notes here. So are there dogs that have an innately lower frustration tolerance than others? Sure, there are. But I think the dogs generally, in general terms, I think the dog's quote unquote frustration tolerance is 95% a function of their learning history and the trainer's ability to make that dog successful. Okay. So frustration is a function of the learner not accessing what they want.
Mhm.
And so we create frustration by not making it clear to the dog how they access reinforcement. And by creating cleaner training and slicing down things into smaller bites and working as best we can towards errorless learning, we will all but minimize frustration. Now, some dogs move at a faster pace than the trainer is able to keep up with. And, there's certainly real world dynamics here. So I'm simplifying a little bit. However, I think frustration is largely a function of the trainer's ability to make the dog successful and to make it clear how and when and why they're accessing reinforcement. I really genuinely believe that. So from a sport dog perspective or a working dog perspective, I put that onus very heavily on the trainer to figure out how to clean that up and how to raise the rate of success for the dog. Because if you raise the rate of access to reinforcement, you're basically going to very quickly minimize frustration, right? On the pet dog side of things, it's a little dodgier.
Yes.
Because there's just a lot of moving parts, and getting the owner to be able to mechanically set up the scenario, deliver the reinforcement, be clear with their cues, right? That's a challenge. I struggle with that a lot when dealing with my pet clients, like how much, and a lot of times, and Kelly will have this, but I'm at the point now, more often than sometimes, I'm like, just do a food scatter.
The same thing.
I can imagine that would be tough, because clients don't have the skill that you've worked on for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's got to be some frustration feelings from the dog who just wants to go. And this client can't work fast enough or can't, whatever part of it.
I'm laughing because Liz, I still tell clients that when I first started training with Charles, I started training in front of my mentor, and I said sit, and he sat, and then he down, and then I said sit, and then I gave him a treat, and then he moved, and I moved, and then he moved, and I moved, and then my mentor just said, "Kelly, sit down, just stop."
Was that me?
Yeah, that was you. Really, we were so frenetically feeding off of each other that you basically said, "Kelly, scatter, go away."
Food scatter, I like it. It's gonna be my go-to now.
it does when you see these just the communication happening back and forth and the frustration tolerance of everything we're saying. If I'm trying to get a reinforcer to a dog quickly, and then they realize it's happening quicker, then they start responding quicker. Now you're creating frustration just out of that. And that's not even frustration tolerance. That's just messy training, right? Like that's
I would just say it's you haven't yet developed a clear system for the dog,
okay.
right? The
Yeah.
dog needs predictability. Now, there could be a much bigger lapse of time between, the act and the marker and the reinforcer, but that system has to be clear, right? That it's all communications, right? And it's usually with, your pet clients, there's little to no communication, or what communication is there is very fuzzy and messy and
One-sided.
that's where the frustration comes from, right? So helping, and again, so I'm the full disclosure here, I still battle with that to this day. How much information does the client need? How can I simplify these communication systems? Because what is the most clear and concise way that I can get this communication system shored up for both the owner and the dog? And sometimes it's easy, and more often than not, it's not easy.
Which is
Depending
messy.
on the history and the individuals involved and the mechanics and the environment and all those things, right?
Yeah, it's so messy.
Yeah.
Because I mean, really, like we're talking about, so when I mean, frustration tolerance for me is like if a learner's wrong, how do they handle you saying try again, or they don't get the cookie when they think they should and like they lose their mind. But what I just described to you wasn't that, it was just a complete frustration altogether. So there is such a uh you have to be really careful with labels, I guess, is what this comes down
Well,
to.
no, but to back up to what you were just saying too, because I think that's important. I think it's important to articulate this. If the dog is getting frustrated because they're wrong multiple times, if the dog is getting frustrated because they're not receiving reinforcement multiple times, what does that tell you?
The trainer needs to be better.
The training needs to change.
Yeah.
The training needs to change.
Yeah.
That's too many. It's too many errors. If I see, and my male border collie, he has taught me a lot about managing frustration, because he is one of those classic quote unquote low tolerance for frustration dogs. He does spin up and into arousal. He won't leave. He won't, he'll keep working, but he'll get more frenetic, kind of like Charles was like that, get more frenetic, start barking. And so I've finally, he just turned 6, and I'm, just finally the last year or two, I've really learned to be better at seeing the signs when he's starting to spin up and stopping the session or changing course before I start getting the barking, before I start getting, frenetic type behaviors, right? But I'm a pretty experienced trainer, and I still battle with these things. So, but I think if we can start using our observation skills and stopping or changing course, stop or change course, before we start, because what happens is those behaviors then get embedded into the whole sequence of training, and then that's when you really start getting in trouble.
So you're still going off of, and I say still, I'm assuming, because I think I heard this from Ava and Emily, where if your dog messes up more than once, if they mess up twice, then you definitely need to change your game. Is that like a good rule of thumb to go with?
Generally, yeah, generally. And I would say it depends very much to where you are in the learning process, right? If this is a pretty new behavior and I'm shaping a behavior, yeah, I'm going to be real quick to change course. If this is a behavior my dog, I feel like, has been fluent in for quite some time, and by quite some time, I'm talking like years, I may power through a little bit to try to like scratch at the surface and see what's going on here. But yeah, generally in the early stages of behavior acquisition, if the dog makes 2 errors, I'm going to stop and reboot and be like, okay, what do I need to do to increase the success rate here?
It's interesting. You're getting the same response from Ro that I'm getting from Pluto as far as just male border collie.
Yeah, male intact border collie. They like to spin up.
Camille, I'm opening the floor to you because I know I can keep going.
No, that's okay. It's totally fine. I think frustration tolerance we've talked about. Okay, so one of the next questions was kind of mine because I deal more with clients who have high arousal dogs or high prey dogs or some kind of high drive.
Yeah.
And so do you have when you have clients like that aren't looking to do agility, that they just accidentally got this dog with so much energy? Do you have favorite like relaxation techniques, or like I love to teach a shake it off just to kind of bring things kind of down a little bit, or relax on a mat kind of thing. Do you have favorite techniques that you like to use for those kinds of people, kinds of clients?
I do, but I will say even before that, the only way that people are going to be successful with, high drive dogs is the dog's needs need to be met in some capacity, right? If
Right.
we have a Malinois or a Border Collie or I don't know, some other, juiced up, a GSP or something, and those dogs are not getting the physical exercise, if they're not getting the mental stimulation that they need, I can try to teach them relax on a mat all day long, but it's probably not going to be super effective, right? So I pretty much all of my clients these days, almost all my clients these days, the very first thing we talk about is what sort of activity is this dog getting, right? And considering the breed too, right? What is the breed of dog? What is your living situation? How much, I call it dog time. How much dog time is this dog getting? Does this dog have access to the yard? Does this dog have access to running around freely in some capacity? Does this dog get any sort of like decompression walks or hiking? Does this dog, is this dog able to fulfill its natural needs in any way, shape, or form? Because if the answer to that is a hard no, and you're living with a Malinois or a GSP or a Border Collie, or an Aussie or whatever, you're gonna be swimming upstream constantly, right?
Yep.
And so
Agreed.
that's always my very first line of attack, right? Are the needs of this specific dog being met in its current environment? And if the answer is no, then the decision tree is, can we do a better job in that department? And sometimes it's yes, and sometimes it's no, right? And that's when you get into the really hard part. And
Yep.
I might even go further and say, is a dog walker possible for this dog? Is someone in the family a runner? Is but if you've gone down all the potential avenues and the answer still is no, I feel like we're at a dead end, right? And that's where things get dodgy. But if the answer is yes, either I can do a better job, or yes, this dog is getting, we live on 2 acres and we, take him swimming and we take him hiking. If the answer is yes, and the dog is clearly being fulfilled in his canine needs capacity, then yes, I do, this is more falls into that first category, like sniffing walks and things like that, always wanting to make sure that the dog has physical exercise and mental enrichment, right? And then as far as skills go, I do still boringly default to a lot of mat work. I know it's not exciting, but it tends to work. I have strong feelings about mat work and how it should be trained, because I think there's a lot of different ways to do it out there, and some of them are more effective than others. I think, and the reason I think that that's important here is because dogs, if typically, not always, but let's say we're talking about specifically herding breed dogs or working breed dogs that like to work, right? And if we train quote unquote relaxation by reinforcing offered relaxation, we're not actually training. We may be getting a false set of behaviors that aren't actually relaxation. These dogs are so smart.
My head is down.
I'm laying down. I'm laying down. Look at me. I'm laying down. And I've seen that happen many times. And I've had the owner say, "Oh, look, he's relaxing on the mat," and the dog's like, I'm like, that's not actually relaxed, but he's on the mat and he's laying down. So you do have that going for you, so that's good. But so I am pretty specific about the type of relaxed, behaviors, that how I get to the actual relaxation is pretty specific. But yeah, I would say, Camille, that really still is my go-to, which I know is not very exciting. I think also one thing that there's a lot to be said for is that doesn't deserve enough credit is actually, if I look down right now, I have two of my three, I don't know where the third one is. I have two of my three high drive dogs that know that right now, because I'm looking at the computer and talking, that all bets are off the table as far as them getting reinforcement. And for them, just me standing up and like walking towards the back door, it's reinforcement. But my point being, like, the clarity of when we do active things and when we don't do active things is super, super important. And just those day-to-day structures and boundaries from the human half, I think helps dogs like this relax. Now, they will hear me when we start winding up, and they will know the change in the tone of my voice. And especially if I push my chair back and start standing up, they will all rocket up and rocket towards the back
Game
door.
on.
It's game on. But, they don't really bug me when I'm doing this, because it's very clear to them that there's no reinforcement, aka work or otherwise, or other reinforcers available. So, and actually, real quick, I think that's an important thing too, that for a lot of these dogs, especially the working bred and the herding dogs, the work itself is a huge reinforcer. And I end up having to manipulate that and use that a lot, especially with a lot of my agility clients with herding breeds. Sometimes the dogs will actually continue to make errors over and over and over, and they'll just go on forever, and they don't care, even if they're not getting like the toy or the food, because the work in it of itself is so reinforcing to the dog that the dog will just keep going. And so it's interesting. A lot of people will dig themselves a hole doing that, that we have to then back them out of.
I'm gonna ask you then, what are your thoughts on fetch?
I tell people that it's okay to occasionally use fetch as an act of desperation. That is literally what I tell people. If you are having like the week from hell, and you have not been able to exercise the dog, and your only option is to go out back and play fetch for 10 minutes, and you do that a couple times a month, fine. I'm not going to chastise you for it. Though you better be throwing the ball in a straight line so they can track it. You're not doing anything crazy. But repetitive, daily games of fetch is not healthy. It's not healthy for the dog's brain, and it's certainly not healthy for them orthopedically either. So again, if it's one tool that only gets pulled out of your arsenal occasionally, I'm going to be the last person to chastise you for that, but it should not be your go-to.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Go back more into throwing the ball straight out so that they can track it.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more?
So I always want to make sure that when I'm playing fetch, rarely when I play fetch, and I do it less and less and less as the years go on, I want to throw the ball in a way that it goes far and straight, and the dog can turn around and drive out straight and track the ball, and ideally even catch it like on a bounce, as opposed to, like, I have dogs that will literally pile drive themselves into the ground to try to get a static toy. Or actually, God, B just did it to me. Was it yesterday? I just kind of like haphazardly chucked a toy for B, and she rocketed. This is my almost 10-year-old dog who had a CCL injury last year, surgery. She launches up in the air, and her rear end isn't as strong as it used to be, and she came down and kind of splatted on the ground. I was like, oh God. And that was just 1 nanosecond of me being careless, So I'm very particular about when I do play ball or throw toys for the dogs that either with her in particular, I throw it straight, like I want her facing me, and I literally would just throw it straight at her face. So she can just catch it, right? There's not a lot of chasing. There's not a lot of pounding and because my dogs will literally just pile drive themselves into the ground to get a toy. And so I have to be kind of careful about that.
I'm just,
so a lot of injuries.
I could see it. No, absolutely. It's just, I'm thinking, because like there are other trainers I follow, and I'm not hiking as much as I used to in California. And North Carolina is not the same. So I have expanded our fetch game to putting treats on the ground, having him work, and then saying a get it cue, so he goes gets it, and it kind of expands the
Okay.
fetch game a little more.
Yeah.
To your point, that high drivey. So we were talking about frustration tolerance, quote unquote, right? And about how it's something that both the trainer and the dog can learn what the reinforcement system is. So hypothetically speaking, not hypothetically speaking, you could potentially teach a dog to do fetch without going to that 0 to 60, potentially, right?
I think I understand your question. Like, but what, I guess define fetch. I'm not totally sure what you're asking me.
Getting the ball, bringing it back, doing a few cues for working, and then throwing ball, toy, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Oh.
And I do think that I think asking the dog for behavior and then using the toss as the reinforcement is a very different headspace that you're going to put the dog in than the mindless chuck it right for 20 minutes. The dog that's in the first scenario is going to be a little bit more in it, hopefully a lot more in thinking brain, as opposed to my lizard brain analogy, where they're just that the chuck it, the repetitive chuck it, that's just lizard brain, that's just prey drive, and there's no asking the dog for any sort of operant behavior or any sort of control. They're just like off in some other universe, parallel universe, chasing that ball repetitively over and over and over and over.
Camille was asking me
And
what I
that's
meant
the
by
kind of
lizard
stuff.
brain, and I like that you just used it, because Camille, this is where I got lizard brain from.
I like that. It's an
Yeah.
interesting term. I like that.
Yeah, the lights are on, but nobody's home, but there's some sort of like repetitive, more instinctual kind of action going on. We see it a lot in the herding dogs when they're stalking, or my male border collie loves to watch other dogs running, and he loves to watch other dogs playing agility, and he loves to watch TV. Those are all like lizard brain sorts of things where he's just like, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, because we're gonna have to start asking people how they define fetch now moving forward, because I think that in itself, right?
Yeah.
Is a different thing.
Yeah.
That was helpful.
Totally. When you said fetch, I assumed it was more the mindless lizard brain chasing until until the dog's like tongue is down to its knees and it can barely stand up anymore. I mean, that's kind of what I assume, but that's not always necessarily the case.
Yeah, no, because we were talking about just the average Joe getting a border collie, and I think that more times than not, in their best attempts, they try meeting the dog's needs, but meeting the dog's needs isn't the same as what you described. They're how they. So if you have a client come to you and they've been trying to meet their needs, but you can see that it's a little bit over the top, are there certain signs that are red flags that you're like, oh, we need to actually step back on what we're doing and maybe have some more decompression time?
Yeah, I mean, if they're telling me their main source of exercise for the dog is, chuck it or frisbee, and there's no other, more natural, exploratory, olfactory, casual movement happening, then yeah, I definitely absolutely try to steer them in that direction. It's a hard sell for a lot of people. A lot of people do not want to get in the car and and again, maybe it's a little different where you guys live. Here, we live in suburbia, and now there are plenty of places you can take your dog. I will know better than anybody that even in San Diego and in coastal San Diego, there's places where you can squirrel away and take the dog and actually let them off leash. But it takes effort and time and energy and changing your schedule and your routines. And you guys know how that goes. It can be a hard sell. So.
All good points. Camila, do you have anything to ask? I was gonna go back to the questions.
Not right now.
We asked this to everyone that's been on our podcast. We're trying just to kind of talk about what's not talked about because there's a lot of keywords that everyone wants to jump down, like fetch in the dog training world. But when it comes to you, as far as when you think about all the crumbles, the different components that go into dog training that make up the whole cookie, what crumbles do you think get ignored or put most on the back burner and need to be discussed more?
So we already touched a little bit on one of the things that I wrote down, which is just spending time making sure the dog's natural needs and drives are being met. So, and this is not anything that your average dog trainer doesn't know. If you get a Vizsla and then you're frustrated that it's like, stalking birds instead of recalling, or you get a husky and it keeps getting out and it's running away, or you get a terrier and it's digging holes. It's like these dogs are genetically programmed to do X. And how can we as trainers help pet clients understand these things? It's tough. So we all, and I actually think, here's something I will say. I actually think many dog trainers could be better versed in the different breeds and what the different breeds individual needs are and tendencies and all of that kind of stuff, because the better versed you are in breeds traits, it just gives you information and it can help you look like a genius to the client in the problem solving department sometimes, so there's that. And I think most trainers who've been around the block long enough are pretty good, but and I'm not saying you need to know like what a Caucasian Novarchka or whatever, something like that does, but you do need to know what a Vizsla and a Weimaraner need as opposed to a Pyrenees, as opposed to a Whippet. Like those things are important to know.
When I first
those
started
things,
working
to
for
know
Liz, it was a really annoying kid but Liz, what do you think about the paper that just came out that said it doesn't have to anything to do with breeds? What are your thoughts on that?
Blah.
And to be clear, that paper by Jessica Heckman did mention that breeds aren't everything, but they still are important. So for those that read the paper and said it has nothing to do with breeds,
Yes.
Yeah, that poor paper, that thing really got spun sideways. So that's one thing. And I think this may sound like woo-woo, but
box
I
breathing.
see this. Everybody needs to understand what box breathing. Kelly can give her own webinar on box breathing. I've heard you mention it in the podcast before. You should have like a little, like, I don't know, you guys get some sort of bonus, like count how many times Kelly says box breathing and win a prize.
Tally, running tally.
I love it.
Sorry, what's your woo comment?
My woo comment. And this seems obvious for pet clients, but I see this way too often, even in professionals or sport dog people who've been, hardcore into dogs in varying capacities for decades. But like acknowledging that the dog is an individual and recognizing that dog for who they are and not what we expect them to be or want them to be, or what our desired outcome with that specific dog is. And I see that all the time, and it crushes dogs. And it's a little nebulous, and it's a little it's hard to, and if you guys have ideas for how to articulate this to people in a way that doesn't offend them, please send them my way, because I see this. And
because your last point was that breeds are important. Now you're saying that, well, you can't expect the breed to be exactly like, it's so contradictory.
Yeah, it is contradictory. But again, they are individuals, right? And maybe I got a border collie because I had grand visions of being the agility champion of the world, and that dog either, exactly.
It's not working out.
That dog didn't have, in your case, maybe the dog doesn't have the specific temperament, right, to do all the things. Or in my case, my dog had a physical disability that disallowed us to, you know, achieve our goals or what goals I thought I had with this dog at an early age. And so, you know, having the grace to like accept that, it's no picnic, but you know, we have to accept the dogs for who they are. And it's frustrating with, you know, the type A people, type A sport people right here. You know, I have goals and I have plans and I want to do this and I want to do that. And when things go sideways for whatever reason, that's hard. It's like a bitter pill to swallow. But I do think I don't want to say I'm glad that my dog had a physical disability that, you know, basically crushed our dreams, but I have learned a lot from that. And I will say, I tell people this all the time, I am so glad that I have this dog because I love him to death. And I do appreciate him for who he is. And he's just a phenomenal animal. So that has been a really good learning experience for me. Right. But anyway, not to make this about me. It's not about me, but just
this episode is all about you. So please keep continuing.
So I have to throw this out there. I just last night went to I'm part of Christina Spalding's Research Bites group.
Oh, cool.
And we did yesterday she did a webinar on a new paper that's out, and I'm sorry, let's see, what's the date? Well, it was last summer. Human Expectations of Canine Behavior and Companionship. Danielle Stevens-Lewis and Kimberly Caroline Schinke. I hope I say that right. But it was really interesting because it was pet owners who were, and I believe it was 176 pet owners, and they were all asked, you know, what is it that you want in a dog? What makes, you know, and then everybody said a well-rounded dog, and they were like, okay, well, what does that mean? And then they gave all their, it was very, very interesting. And
I would love to see that, Camille.
It's so the paper itself, I'm happy to send you a link to it. It's not an open paper, so like I couldn't see the whole paper, but Christina's webinar taught us through the paper and kind of explained what was going on, gave us more details that we couldn't see.
Oh, I bet that
was really, it really was. She of course, everything Christina does is just so fabulous. But it was interesting to see what people thought about dogs and the way they expect them. You know, like my clients, everybody wants the dog they can take to the brewery and the dog won't get in any fights, because we know that a bunch of unknown dogs and alcohol in their owners is a great idea, right? Like
I just keep popping up.
It just blows my mind. But all the people, and they were people from all around the world, and we're all talking about, you know, the expectations that people have of their dogs, and are they realistic? Are they? It was just it was an interesting subject to talk about.
Yeah, I bet. That's interesting. I'll have to try to get the info from you and see if I can somehow access that.
Yeah. And things, just how we plan it one way, and that's not the dog we get. And we always talk about training the dog in front of you, right? The one that you got, train that one, no matter what breed or genetics or whatever it has, train the dog in front of you. But that's not easy for people to accept a lot of times. That's a tough road to haul.
Well, I feel like something that we should all be giving each other space for, as well as how our lives change. I mean, I got a border collie who is snoring right now, but like, because I wanted to do agility, but then I never expected I'd find someone that I'd want to spend all my time with instead. Like, I think that people just need to give each other space for, you get this high drive dog, what did you think? But your life has also changed too. And now let's adapt. Like, I don't think that the world is forgiving enough for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's valid, Kelly. And yeah, it's everybody's, I mean, again, I always go back to the, you know, Brene Brown, like everybody's doing the best they can, right? And I think that's so important. Yeah, we do. We have to give people grace. On the other side of that coin, if someone hires you to come in
bring it on,
fix their problems.
That's right.
Oh goodness! What to do, and you tell them they're paying you money to tell them what to do. I guess it's obviously their prerogative to take that information and do with it what they will. But
sure, absolutely.
But I mean, I feel like that's one thing too. every time that we have three professionals in the Zoom room, and well, not like Zoom room training, like this Zoom room
This Zoom.
This Zoom room.
This
Um,
Zoom.
we all handle things so differently. And for anyone to say that this is the method that you must use, it's just so erroneous because we all function so
Oh,
differently. So
I agree.
really enjoy how we all approach this so differently. That brings us to Liz. Do you have any upcoming events that you want to advertise? Anything you want to promote?
I'm doing a couple in-person trips, teaching trips in the next couple months. This is actually really funny. I've been communicating with the people I'm teaching for, but I didn't realize this is hilarious. On Memorial Day weekend on Saturday and Sunday, I'm going to Minneapolis area and I'm teaching at Agile Canines, which I'm really excited about. I've actually been there before and it's lovely. And then in the beginning of August, in the beginning of August, I'm going to Colorado. I think the town is Keona. It's like southeast of Denver. And that facility is called the Agile Canine. I did not realize that those two names were so similar. It's hilarious. So I'm doing some in-person teaching, traveling, and then I'm finishing up one of my online classes here, and might be launching another one this fall. Kelly, hopefully maybe you can help keeping me accountable. But yeah, I'm pretty open book about what I'm doing on Facebook primarily. And so I also do remote coaching. I have a few remote coaching clients from around the country right now. And then obviously I do my in-person stuff here in San Diego. So a little bit of everything, and I'm pretty easy to track down online.
So
what's your Facebook? Just so we can say it for everybody
we'll
out
put a
here.
link in the show notes of that too.
Yeah, we will.
It's just Liz Randall. If you search Liz Randall agility, I'm sure it will come up. I'm really bad about maintaining Facebook business sites, but I have too many of them that are neglected. But my regular website is resilientdogs.com, and that's my most up-to-date information and way to contact me. So yeah.
And
Liz, it's been such a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It was fun. It was really fun. I love talking about this stuff. So.
I feel like I haven't argued so I think I need to make up for it in the future. Thank you.
You will. Well,
I really appreciate you being here.
Thank
we
you for
didn't talk
having
about
me.
it. You have Ro, B, and Wyatt.
Yep.
You have 3 dogs now?
Yep. I have 3. Yeah, we lost our old guy, our 16 and plus year-old dog. We lost about a month ago. So he was my first agility dog. So that was what do we call it? Changing of the guard, changing of the seasons, you know. So yeah, I have B, who's 9.5, border collie. I have Rowan, who's just 6-year-old border collie, and I have Wyatt, who's just 2-year-old sport mix, abomination, mixed breed, purpose bred. He's awesome. And so I have 3 very high drive dogs that keep me very busy, and I might get another one this year because I'm crazy. So we'll see how that goes.
Good for you.
4 dogs.
I like it.
I've got my systems down. It's all good.
Fair enough. You do. Thank you. I really appreciate you being
You're
here.
welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Camille,
Congratulations on your podcast.
Oh my gosh, yeah, no, we're doing
thanks.
And I think, Camille, that is the way
the cookie crumbles.
All right.
Thanks for being here, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.